By the way, in Iran, we're doing very well. Somebody said, how would you score it from 0 to 10? I said, I'd give it a 12 to a 15. Their army is gone. They're just about, look, their navy is gone. Their communications are gone. Their leaders are gone. 2 sets of their leaders are gone. They're down to their 3rd set. Their air force is wiped out entirely. Think of it. They have 32 ships. All 32 are at the bottom of the ocean.
The expanding war in Iran entered its 2nd week on Saturday, with Iran's president making an unusual apology to neighboring states amid regional anger at Iranian strikes on civilian targets in the Gulf. In a statement broadcast on news outlet WANA, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian personally apologized to neighboring countries affected by Iran's actions. He said Iran's military did not intend to violate the Gulf states, but had to defend itself against what he called brutal aggression. Pezeshkian also dismissed US President Donald Trump's demand for Iran's unconditional surrender as a dream. On social media, Trump cast Pezeshkian's apology as Iran surrendering to its Middle East neighbors, while saying the country would be hit very hard on Saturday. Pezeshkian's remarks caused a political stir in his own country, with a hardline cleric calling them unprofessional, weak, and unacceptable. That prompted the president's office to reiterate that Iran's military would respond firmly to attacks from US bases in the region. Over the past week, the Iranian military has hit Israel and neighboring states hosting US military installations. Gulf Arab countries have voiced outrage that civilian infrastructure, such as ports and hotels, were struck, even though they had no part in the US-Israeli campaign. Pezeshkian said Iran's Temporary Leadership Council had agreed to halt attacks on nearby states unless strikes on Iran originated from their territories. Hours after his statement on Saturday, Iran's Revolutionary Guards said they had struck a US air combat center in the United Arab Emirates. Reuters could not independently verify that report.
مقداد زد. اوه! آره نایه مقداد آزادی و زد. یه دونم پشتشه.
Beirut's Hezbollah-controlled southern suburbs stood in ruins on Saturday, as Israel warned Lebanon of a very heavy price if it failed to rein in the Iran-backed group. Lebanon was dragged into the wider Middle East war on Monday when Hezbollah fired at Israel, which responded with a new military campaign that forced hundreds of thousands of Lebanese from their homes. Israel pounded the group's strongholds across Lebanon with airstrikes, and overnight helicopters dropped troops in Lebanon's eastern Nabi Chit in a rare and deadly airborne raid. Resident Qassem al-Masawi said locals and troops clashed for about an hour. Hezbollah said in a statement that it had fired on Israeli troops dropped near Nabi Chit and that the troops had withdrawn. Israel's military said the operation sought the remains of Ron Arad, an Israeli Air Force navigator missing in Lebanon since 1986, though no findings related to him were recovered and none of its forces were injured, it said. Addressing Lebanon's president, Joseph Aoun, in a televised statement on Saturday, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said the whole country would suffer if the Lebanese government failed to enforce a 2024 agreement to disarm Hezbollah. If the choice is between protecting our civilians and our soldiers or protecting the state of Lebanon, we will choose the protection of our civilians and soldiers, Katz said. Hezbollah has told Israeli citizens living in communities near the border to flee their homes, though Katz said they should not. The United Nations warned on Saturday that the conflict was set to get even worse. Israeli strikes have killed more than 200 people across Lebanon, and orders to evacuate have displaced around 300,000 people.
Israel pounded Beirut on Friday in an expanding conflict with Iran-backed Hezbollah that has sent tens of thousands of Lebanese fleeing their homes. Everyone in Beirut's densely populated southern suburbs was given Israeli orders to leave. Civilians in parts of southern and eastern Lebanon have also been told to evacuate. It is a major expansion of the war against Iran that it began a week ago alongside the United States. Lebanon was pulled into the war on Monday when Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel to avenge the killing of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. That ignited a new Israeli offensive against what is Iran's most powerful regional ally. The United Nations has warned that the number of displaced people in Lebanon is expected to rapidly increase, with about 100,000 already cramming shelters. Jamal Saifuddin, who fled Beirut's southern suburbs, said people were sleeping on the street, in cars and on the beach. Israeli tanks and troops were visible operating in a bombed-out village in southern Lebanon. Hundreds of Israeli troops were also seen, setting up fortifications on the Israeli side of the border fence. Israel has intervened in Lebanon repeatedly over decades, most recently in a campaign that weakened Hezbollah in 2024. But the ferocity of Friday's strikes had little precedent, even in the long history of war in the Lebanese capital.
Aid to Gaza, Sudan and other world crises is grinding to a halt as the war in the Middle East disrupts air, sea and land routes. 10 aid officials have told Reuters. The US-Israeli war on Iran has resulted in airspace closures and the halt of shipping through the critical Strait of Hormuz, which is effectively closed. Life-saving goods for rapid regional deployment are stuck at warehouses in Dubai's humanitarian hub, and costs are soaring for helping the hundreds of millions suffering hunger.
When we don't deliver goods from humanitarian cargo, impact could be lives not saved. So we are really worried about the situation.
Cecile Taraz of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, or IFRC, said the group can't currently move aid stocks from its Dubai hub through the Jebel Ali port, where it would normally move onto planes or into the Strait of Hormuz. On March 1st, Jebel Ali, the region's largest container terminal, was set ablaze by the debris of an intercepted missile.
It can get much worse with the backlog of cargo air freight, with a number of ports which are operating but shipments are not being able to be unloaded, with a number of border issues which are closing right now. Every day that this situation goes on creates a larger supply chain problem for us and for the world.
Massive donor cuts are already straining aid groups' budgets. Now they face soaring operational costs. Costs for fuel, transportation and insurance are rising. Shipping firms are demanding emergency surcharges of approximately $3,000 per container, according to the International Organization for Migration. Tents, tarpaulins and lamps destined for Gaza and the Israeli-occupied West Bank are stuck in the supply chain, the group said.
We're particularly concerned about Africa.
Famine-struck Sudan is particularly exposed, says UNHCR spokesperson Charlotte Wolfe.
Sudan is approaching very shortly the 3-year mark of this terrible crisis, the largest displacement crisis in Africa. And of course, crises that are already extremely neglected and lacking immediate funding. And so this could be further exacerbated.
Jean-Martin Bauer, Director of Food Security at the UN's World Food Programme, said the war could increase the risk of hunger worldwide.
And it's not just the cost; it's also the time. The time factor is quite critical here. We're talking about very important nodes in the global transportation network and the global supply chain network. What will happen is that people in dire need of assistance will have to wait longer for food.
It was ordinary people who lived here. Where were they targeting? There's a school here. Where were they targeting? There was a neighbor upstairs and on the 4th floor, a neighbor with an adult son.
I grabbed the dog and ran into the closets and held on to the doorknob. Everything was shaking, and then it sounded like a train was driving through the house, and then you could hear the wind like just whirling and whirling, and you could hear stuff hitting stuff, you know, just, it was devastating, but it didn't last very long.
All of the water from that level, from that river, you can see from those banks of the river up to there. It was dangerous water.